Welcome to the new episode of the Marketing Meeting. My guest today is Steph Egger. Steph is a brand strategist with a background in human sciences, linguistics, and communications. Welcome to the show, Steph.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a while since my last podcast. I gave a little break because I was completely immersed in a strategy project. And at each project, I have the chance to question my process a bit. Do I follow the correct methodology, or can there be a better way to make it faster? Or all these questions and concerns that you build up on your mind. So I think this is as I just recently finished my strategy work. This is a good time to speak to another brand strategist and get to know their process. And I would like to ask you. That's why I'm going to start by asking: when you are starting a new brand strategy project, is there a process that you follow, or can you give like maybe a step-by-step simple path for people that never done it before?
I don't know about simple path, right? Strategy is pretty complex. It shouldn't be complicated, but it is complex, right? Same but different a little bit. I guess the first thing I would do is try and define the scope of work, and that's not just with strategy, but that's really with any project, right? So just making sure that you understand what kind of problem you're trying to solve, and then why does it matter? Is it the right problem to solve? And then how do we imagine doing this? Right. So figuring out kind of the sandbox we're going to play in, I think is step number one, really. And it might be actually what matters most to any strategic project, because if you don't have the right problem, then your solution doesn't matter, basically, because you're not gonna move the needle, right? You're not gonna make stride. You're not gonna grow. You're not gonna bring in more revenue, or you might, but it might be out of sheer luck. So that's first thing I would say. Scope of work, problem framing. There's different words for it, I guess.
But
And
instead
then,
of, I'm
yeah,
sorry to cut your word on, since we are
good.
on step one, identifying the problem, is it identifying the problem for that brand itself or for the customer? How does it, I mean, can you give an example to that?
Yeah. So I meant more for the company itself, for the business itself, just figuring out where they are at the time and what they're asking for, and why does that matter, and where do they want to go, and why is that important, right? So it's more in terms of like company and business goals. What are we trying to achieve? I think that's the first step. And then, of course, you get into what the customer needs. But you figure that out with the next step, which is, for me, but for a lot of people too in that field, which is research, right? Whether that's desktop research, field trip, active listening on social media, whatever that looks like, researching. And I typically use a pretty well-known framework, which is the 4 C's. So consumer, company, competition, and culture.
Oh, nice.
You evaluate those 4 elements. You dig for data, right? You dig deep and you go look for information that you can then use to find an insight, something that gives you a new perspective on things, gives you a new angle to solve the problem you've set up in the problem framing, in the scope of work step that you took at the beginning of your brand strategy project, if you want to call it that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. To ask another question here, you said culture. How is that the culture of the company or the culture and community of the consumer? And if it's the culture of the company, how does it relate to the brand strategy?
Right. So the culture of the company would typically come in the company side of
Mhm.
things of that quadrant, if we'd like, of the four C's. And in terms of culture, we're talking society, right? How how does something, a product, a service, fit into society, into the cultural trends at the moment, and how they're evolving with time, with changing micro and macro environments, right? So you just want to make sure that you're not like completely out of sync with what's happening in the world at the time. I think that that matters too.
Mhm. So basically, it's not the company's culture; it's the culture that the brand is operating.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes, it's the
Nice.
culture the brand is operating in. Yes, absolutely. Um,
So we have the scope of the work, we have the four C's, and then that's the research process. And then what is
mhm.
next?
Next step would be, for me at least, once again, is about positioning. It's about finding your uniqueness
Mhm.
as a company in your
Mhm.
field. Everything you've done so far with the research is going to help inform where you stand and how you can position yourself better in relation to those four C's: consumer, competition, culture, and your own self, your own company, right? Um, and here it's really about, I use this phrase a lot, but digging deep into like who you are as a company, what do you do, who do you serve, and why it matters, right? And really not shying away from the inconvenient truths about your product, your service, your approach, your people, um,
Mhm.
maybe also who you serve. There could be inconvenient truths about the people you serve, but don't shy away from them and just figure out like exactly what you can leverage, right, to your advantage, so you can position yourself as the solution, and also so you can outmaneuver your competition, because you're probably not the only one serving those people. You're probably not the only one delivering the type of products and services you deliver. If you are, congratulations, you're one of the very few, I think.
Yeah.
Well, because it is, think
Um,
about it, it is a really like a overcrowded market, right? Marketplace. I think most services and most products, like, we talk a big deal about innovation, category creation, right? Category design and all this, which is fine. But at the end of the day, innovation happens incrementally and very slowly, I think. Um, Very rarely do we see something that's like out of left field, completely disrupt a
mhm.
category. And I think we're going to be talking about this later on this episode. But sometimes innovation is not even about like really coming up with a new product or innovating in terms of like engineering a new product or service, but it's just about putting a twist on something that exists already, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
In that brand positioning, so like after the brand positioning work, I mean, do you have some simple steps, or like, no, I keep on referring to simple
mhm.
steps, sorry about that. It's not simple at the end of the day, so that's why people
Right.
recruit or keep teams in place for that. But after that,
Mhm.
is there any other step that you take after defining the brand positioning of a company?
Once you kind of have an idea of like where your strengths lie, I think the next organic step would be to just develop an identity around this, right? And it's kind of a give and take, actually. I don't think there necessarily has to be like, okay, we need to first figure out our strengths and then based our identity and our communication off of that. You can do the opposite, right? You can say, hey, I want to be perceived as this. I want people to perceive this as my strengths. And I know this goes against like kind of what most people say, but sometimes it's really about just designing your strategic advantage, right? Um, and sometimes you don't have one, right? So you spend a lot of time digging into your uniqueness, your position, and how you can position yourself, and you figure out, well, we're not different in any kind of ways. So then comes the time to kind of like figure it out. And
Mhm.
so that's what I meant, where it doesn't have to be this step by step, like aligned, like linear um, model, right?
Yeah.
So, but identity development, I think, follows positioning um, often still.
Mhm.
And by identity development, what I mean is you're really going to go not just into the visual and verbal identity, so like copy, tone of voice, logos, visuals, all of that, but also your purpose. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
why you're in business beyond making money, so you can
Mhm.
connect with people a little easier. You can give them a sense of like what you stand for, so they can relate to you too. And then you're going to develop from the purpose. You're going to develop a vision, a mission,
Mhm.
values. Those values are going to inform how you need to behave internally as a team and externally, how you can communicate about that behavior too. And then, like I just said, you're going to communicate a whole lot. So it's touch points, it's campaigns, um, all that good stuff that at the end of the day matters a whole lot because no one's going to come looking for you. We
Yeah.
said earlier that like it's an overcrowded market. No one's going to come looking for you. That's why so many people rely almost solely on paid marketing, right? On paid advertising, because
Mhm.
you need to increase your reach as a brand, as a business, so you acquire more customers, and so you stay top of mind. I'm
Yeah.
throwing a lot of
Um.
stuff right now at you. I feel like.
Yeah. No. 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 I mean, I have a few questions regarding
Hmm.
to that. First of all, can you give a nice brand positioning example so that people who are
Yeah.
listening can relate to it?
Hmm. Um, the one that comes to mind right away for me is Liquid Death, and I know it's been talked about over and over and over again, but there's a reason why. I think it's because it stands for something, and what it stands for is very easily recognizable by anyone almost. Now, there are a few people I've realized that don't know about Liquid Death still, even though it's made a lot of noise ever since their valuation back in November last year. Um, but I think it's just their position as like a water brand that doesn't care about the typical water category principles is very apparent in everything they do, in their communications, in their packaging, in their values. Um, it's effortless. Uh, so that's why it's an example I like to use right now. I don't know if you have one in mind.
But I mean, Liquid Death is a nice example. Although, I mean, I'm surprised that I've heard about Liquid Death 1 year ago when I moved to US. Can you imagine that?
Hmm.
And I'm in the
Right.
marketing business. I follow trends, ads, and so on. And back in Europe, I had no clue who Liquid Death was.
Hmm.
So, when I moved to US, I suddenly started, because also in November last year, as you said, they did like a significant leap.
Hmm.
That's a very nice example. I mean, as always, the examples that I can give is always from Nike as my old school. For example, very good positioning example, also repositioning example that I can give from there because I know the core of the business. I used to work on women's brand sites, which is like anything related to women.
Hmm.
So I think 10 years ago, the target and the positioning of Nike towards women category was we were targeting an age between 19 to 21 and at a different type of not only it's not only about demographics of course but at a different type of consumer which I'm not going to share too much details but after a while the insights show that women actually starts or drops, well, like adopts sports habits earlier than they go to college.
Mhm.
So once they are at the college, most of their habits and everything is already structured. And then they also see that social media is getting adopted from young people and so on. So they say, okay, 1921 is already too late. We're going to reposition our brand to target actually 16-year of modern sports of fitness, and that's the sweet spot that we targeted, which
Mhm.
meant that all the organization who's doing women's are now positioned to talk to the 16-year-old girl rather than the 19-year-old woman.
Mhm.
So that's a huge shift because their media channels are different, their tone of voice are different, the things that you can connect to them are different. If you do a grassroots activity, it shouldn't be in college, it should be back in the school, and sometimes you
Mhm.
need to collaborate with the parents because they are already small, so
Yeah.
that's a good repositioning example that I can give from
Yeah.
Nike.
No, that's a tremendous example, and thank you for playing your role when I
Yeah,
flipped it on
uh,
you. The
yeah,
liquid
that's
death,
good.
the liquid death is actually your take on liquid death is actually a good point that maybe we fail to mention at times when we just talk about brands like this in especially in the states. I have heard that Europeans did not necessarily hear about liquid death, uh, even still now to this day. So that might not be the best example. Now it just
Mhm,
shows that positioning is also about who you're targeting and who you're serving, and you cannot, or it is very difficult, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of energy and efforts and money
mhm,
to be a world recognized brand. I think, as is Nike, as is Coca Cola. They have
mhm,
their positioning, of course, but it took them a while. And of course, now the availability plays into it too. The fact that they're available physically and mentally with advertising in any market, any country, um, speaks to their efforts in positioning themselves as the biggest brands. But it's a fair point about liquid death that actually, yeah, makes me just realize, like, or I want to help people realize more, like, positioning is also about saying no to a certain type of people and being okay with it in
yeah,
some
I think
ways.
in that sense, what you called out as the 4 C's that we do at the very beginning of the strategy process is important because, like, the culture part,
Hmm.
because you cannot, let's say, liquid that, the example is that you cannot push the same message globally and expect that people will notice your brand or will appreciate or will connect. That's why brands like Nike, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or some other global brands, when where they do real brand marketing, uh, they do localization. They just only just push the same message all around. Some of the
Hmm.
things, yeah, some of the things are adapted by market, but when they want to do something real local and culturally relevant, then they just deep dive into the insights of that community and try to find those moments and so on. So that's why I think culture is quite important, because I believe that if liquid debt is would push the same message to a country, let's say like Turkey, it
Hmm.
may not resonate. And also,
Right.
it also depends on the availability as well. I mean, so it's not only about marketing and brand marketing and communications that you do, it's also about the physical availability in the marketplace. I mean, if they don't see you,
Absolutely.
they have no clue about your product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One more question about the strategy process. Uh, what are, because you mentioned mission, vision, and so on, uh,
Hmm.
what are some of the fundamentals and non-fundamentals of a brand strategy work? Because sometimes when it's like when there's like mission, vision, objectives, strategic priorities, I even myself can get lost, and I'm still like,
Yes.
when I hear mission, I was like, okay, mission is, and vision
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
So could you tell me, like, what if? A brand strategy frame work is missing vision, but it has
Right.
a mission, let's say.
What's it gonna do? Is the company gonna implode? Right. It doesn't have a
Yeah.
vision.
Or let's
um.
say maybe they have a vision, but they don't have a
Right.
mission or something like that.
Right. Yeah. No. No. I get what you mean. Yeah. I kind of fast forwarded through all those elements. It was kind of to give the overview of what could typically go into a
Mhm,
brand strategy project and like a final presentation, I guess, or at least some sort of almost training document, right, to align your teams internally and say, okay, this is what we do, this is why,
mhm,
this is where we want to go, this is how, etc., etc. Um, so, are there any uh, truly fundamental things with a brand strategy? I'm not sure. I'm going to be honest. It really
mhm.
depends, once again, on the scope of work and the problem that you frame and what you want to do. I
Yeah.
think, though, with any project, in terms of like when you discuss strategy, it's about defining a highly desirable future outcome and how you're going to get there and why do you want to get there. So those three elements matter the most. So in that sense, I would go back to like problem framing and reframing, then defining some sort of opportunity that it creates for
Mhm,
you in your market, um, naming and framing a big idea on
mhm,
how to solve the problem, and then explaining the strategic advantage it creates, that this big
mhm,
idea that you have for your brand strategy, right? And then have
mhm,
a rollout plan of like, okay, this is how we can move forward, because it's easy to say like, oh, I have this big grand idea, and then if someone asks you like, well, how do we do it, you kind of have to at least, at the very least, be able to say, well, we could do this and that. It's going to take about this amount of time and it should cost about this much, right? At least have a let's say a tiny bit of an idea of how you can roll that out, how you can
yeah.
activate your strategic advantage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm
It
kind of
makes
like,
sense.
I realized I kind of went high level on you with the fundamentals,
No, that's all
right?
right. So let's discuss maybe the dilemma of brand and marketing in
Hmm.
2023, the hot topic of all.
Yes.
Now we have, AI, social media algorithms, short attention spans, and etc., etc. And everyone is copy pasting anything in less than 24 hours. What's your take on this? How should a brand approach marketing in 2023?
Well, my take, first off, on AI and everything, how it's evolving, is as a consumer and as a, I guess, content creator. As much as I'm not a fan of the word, I don't necessarily appreciate it that much. I've already had people comment on my post on LinkedIn, for example, with, well, actually, it wasn't people commenting; it was AI, and because there's a
Yeah.
typical framework, right, of like the AI takes what was said in your post and then kind of restructures it, and then maybe the commenter adds a little bit of their own juice, but that's about it. And you read the comment and you're like, well, that's exactly what I said in my post. So what are you saying here? Anyway, so as a consumer, I'm not too happy about how things are evolving, and I'm kind of pessimistic about the whole thing. I have to say, and I'm not sure exactly how we can fight this. There's a lot of talk about create better and good content, campaigns, focus on the strategic
Mhm.
idea. So it's everything that works with me and my skills and what I do professionally. So, of course, I'm happy about that. I think there's a strong case to be made that AI so far um, cannot necessarily match a human brain in terms of ideas for future possibilities. because it is mostly like it mostly works off of past data, right? Um, so that's good. I'm happy about that. But for the rest, in terms of how much we're seeing already from brands, it's a it's an overcrowded market, and an overcrowded market makes a lot of noise, right?
Yeah.
For anyone, for you, for me, any customer, consumer, people in general, we are bombarded by uh, messages and communications all the time. So I don't think that's where I'm very pessimistic. I don't think that that is gonna help in any way. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm ranting right now and rambling, but the
I
shortening
can
of the
admire also.
attentions. Yeah, go ahead. Please help me.
I I'm not also like I don't have like 100% like I'm not 100% confident on my
Hmm.
answers as well, because it's been this is something that I think about it every day, because I also think about it when I'm a customer myself, such as very various short example of what I went through over the weekend is that Whole Foods has like a discount of 33% in beauty section till I think tomorrow or something like that. And I need to buy a cream. But and they have really nice creams and so on. And I said, okay, I went to the store and I said, okay, I mean, there are like so many brands, price is a differentiator. I mean, if I want to buy something nice, I should be buying something expensive. But then at the same price range, there are like three brands that looks promising, right? And then I said, okay, let me go home and make a search on this. And I came home and I started searching and I said, okay, where do I look? I mean, if I do a search on Google, I end up in the, editorial content. Like probably someone, they paid someone and then that person is making a comment about the product and so on. And then I said, okay, let me go to the user, uh, comments, which is again, okay, user comments. I don't know which one is correct because it might be also paid.
Right.
And then, I mean, the last step that I went through was that I decided that I need to check the environmental friendly, and also there's like, some certain elements that are used in the creams. There's a website, governmental website actually, that gives like every product from 1 to 10 rating. And I decided to look into that and said, okay, if it's good, then it's between the range of 1 to 5. And I just checked every product and which one is ranking high. Then I
Hmm.
and I went and go ahead. And then I was into two brands. And then within those two brands, I went to the store stuff and I said, okay, which one is better?
Hmm.
And the girl said, this one, I don't know, I haven't used this, but this one is the one that everyone is asking for. And I said, okay, let me get that one. So
Uh-huh.
you know what I mean? Like, I also don't know where to go as a customer to,
Yeah.
search if that brand is good or not. So that's
Hmm.
the marketplace is very cluttered. Uh, yes, marketing is changing, in my opinion. It's changing really fast. But the things that are changing is actually not the fundamentals. It's the
Hmm.
media channels, tactics, tools that we are using are changing. So what I mean by fundamentals is that, yeah, you have to, just like we went through that, you have to go through the strategy process. You need to know your customer, you need to know the industry, you need to know the tension, and you build a strategy and you build a plan based on that. That's the fundamentals. That is not changing. Every brand needs to do that.
Hmm.
What is changing is the next step. When you have the brand plan, you need to define the customer journey. So where do they shop? That's changing. How is their customer's journey looking like? That's changing, and you need to know that. And also, the other thing is what's the media channels, which is evolving every day. Instagram might be a good media channel to invest a few years back, but it may not be now, or the
Hmm.
influencers such as. And the other thing is, what are the tools? Tools are changing as well. Can you use AI? Can you use automation and so on? So my idea is that yes, you have to be agile and you have to follow what's changing in terms of tactics, tools, and etc., or media channels. But you also need to make sure that you have a strategy and you need to remind that strategy to yourself and not it's not only about staying agile and relevant, it's also staying mindful. Because if you copy paste, if you start forgetting about your strategy and plan and copy paste another brand, then you're losing it, I mean,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
if you copy paste in 24 hours, then on the 25th hour it's already gone, that
Yeah.
tactic is not working any longer, something like that. So
Hmm.
that's why I just like what I'm trying to do as a marketer when I work with brands and I prepare a plan is just making sure that these channels tactics I follow them, but I always go back at every meeting. I always go back to the strategy and the brand plan in the back of my mind. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I
that's what
think
it is.
you touched on something. No, you touched on something very interesting. Is the availability matters a whole lot, and then the fundamentals, of course, of how we work as humans, right? Um, al- Being in alignment with this, but then the one thing you mentioned that caught my attention really was the copyable or uncopyable approach in communication and marketing, right? And that's what positioning is about too. That's what having a good strategy is about. Is having an uncopyable way of outmaneuvering your competition, right? Making sure that if you do something, either you're ready for the next step to go even further in that disruptive or creative thinking, or um, or it's something that no one will copy because they cannot copy it, basically, right? Because otherwise, people are just gonna see that you're successful at this and do the same in like, and it's only going to take them even a shorter amount of time, depending on what we're talking about, because of tools like AI now that have
Yeah.
made tremendous stride, of course. And of course, there's talks about like how helpful it is as a personal assistant for strategists, for example, for the desktop research that we talked about, researching the four C's and all this. Yes, you can use those tools, of course, and even like for the visual aids when you're pitching your strategy. As a strategist, once again, you can create more visually appealing pitches and presentations, so it connects better emotionally with who you're talking to, who you're presenting to, right? And then as a
Yeah.
business, of course, to go back to your question, um, it's I think you have to tune out the noise a little bit. You have to tune out the voice in your head that's going to tell you, hey, my competitors are out there 24/7, thanks to AI or thanks to whatever they're doing, and maybe what they're doing is not good, but you're like, hey, but I have to do something too, because otherwise they're going to be top of mind, not me, no matter how crappy their content is, for example. You have to tune that voice out and really focus on, like you said, just making sure you're in alignment with the media and channels of the time, the cultural trends, and then zagging when everybody's zigging, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And and also, like, it doesn't matter in any industry, because every industry and every brand is unique.
Mm-hmm.
You are, for example, producing a very similar product within the same industry with a competitor, and it doesn't mean that whatever they do, and if they are for example, the competition is very strong, what they are doing exactly the same, you don't have to do that, and you cannot do that actually, because your company is
Mm-hmm.
different, your resources are different. And then that's why, I mean, it's really, I think we are back to square one. That I think it's like a cliche now, but like, yeah, brand
Yeah.
strategy work is important. But doing
Mm-hmm.
that brand strategy work also doesn't come with an AI, because I see very like people working in big consultancy firms looking to AI when they're presenting their strategy work,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, I had a look because I was curious about that. I said, okay, let me check this out, how it's coming up, because and I write it, and some of the things really make sense. But for example, it gives me like 10 options, which is like all of them are so generic, right? It
Mm-hmm.
can also remind you, okay, I haven't taken in this thing into place into my mind, but you have to really declutter based on the uniqueness of the brand, of the company itself, which AI might not know. And then that person who is in the consultancy firm challenged me, okay, you should be briefing the AI in a better way. I mean, you should be giving all these inputs as a, okay,
Hmm.
knowing the strengths of a company is also a strategic thing, right? I mean, if I'm
Yeah.
briefing AI on that means that I need to. It's not only AI that will succeed; it can succeed with a human at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
anyway, I mean, like I'll just leave the AI conversation behind because it's now quite boring.
Never
As I
ending.
mentioned, I mean, like it's like a shiny object that was there, but now we are already getting bored about it. I personally got bored about the conversation with AI about AI, but
Yes.
um, so thank you for sharing the not the simple but step by step path. But I understand that it starts with the scope of the work, and then you have the four C's: company, culture, consumer, and what's the fourth one?
Competition.
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 And then we move to brand positioning and coming up the fundamentals of a brand strategy. That's a good one. I think it's quite similar to what I do also. Like I didn't have like a shiny words of four C's, but I will keep that in mind because it sticks to the mind really.
No, it's a
To
good one. It's typically used in the advertising world, mostly.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but yeah, scope of work, research with the four C's or anything, any type of research you do, positioning, developing the identity off of that, and then activating with touch points and campaigns. Right, that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
the
yeah.
step by step.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially the research part. I mean, if any brand strategist is listening to this, once you deep dive too much into the industry and the insights of the consumer industry and so on, then you see some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of brand strategy and positioning, in my
Yes,
opinion.
absolutely.
Before we close the conversation, I have a few quick lifestyle questions that I would like to ask if you can answer them with like short answers. So, what's your favorite brand?
Favorite brand is so I'm a bit cynical with this, but because I'm a brand strategist, I don't have many. But Target is a good one. I always
Target.
Europeans might not know it. Once again, I didn't know Target until I met my American wife. She told me about Target, and then we moved to the States, and I've lived the Target experience, and I think it's they have good products, they have good customer service, they have good communications, they have a good visual and verbal identity. Um, they just serve the customer in a very good way. So Target is really something that came up to mind. What is yours, if I may?
um, I also don't have too many, but Aesop uh, is a, and I hope it will
Hmm.
continue being a favorite brand. Is a good friend. Is a good friend. Is a good friend brand of mine
Hmm. But
because
that's good. See, you
I've
consider it like a friend.
yeah. Well, I mean, they have been acquired by L'Oreal, and I'm not sure if I will continue
Oh,
considering it
it
as
might
a good friend.
alter. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the reason because of that is that firstly they use geranium a lot, which is geranium stands for ıtır in my language. So my name is my mom and dad, they were inspired by the plant geranium because they're agricultural engineers. So that's why I started. But I really like their visual tone and also verbal tone. They really use incrementally nice tone in their copy, and their stores are very well designed. They also collaborate a lot with architects, with designers, with literature people also time to time.
Hmm.
I like that simple and meticulous way of approaching a brand in that way,
Nice.
and I also love their product. I've even go to there when I was in Melbourne because they're from Melbourne. I even specifically go to their headquarters and take a picture of the building. That's how much I love that brand. But I
That's how
mean, I
much you
don't
love
follow
them.
their social media. Yeah, I mean, like when I do like if I'm in a cosmetics or beauty brand process, strategy process, I always look to their content and try to get some inspiration from there.
Mhm.
So that's the second question is, what's your favorite place for coffee? Now you're in
Try to
Las Vegas, or yeah.
yes. I'll try to keep the answer shorter than the last one. Honestly, my favorite place for coffee is my kitchen table and watching my son play. I
Oh,
don't have much
nice.
time to go out for coffee anymore.
Uh-huh.
So I don't have that local coffee shop favorite of mine here in Vegas, at least. Used to in Switzerland, uh, especially in Europe, there's more of a
Hmm.
local coffee vibe, right? More options.
Yeah, that's right.
In the States, you feel like it's a little harder to get to a good coffee place that isn't Starbucks, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How about the favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast for me would be On Strategy Showcase with Fergus O'Carroll.
Yeah,
Uh, I mean, I guess it's kind of a it's a Bible of strategy for like full of
I
resources,
agree.
full of case studies and examples, and like the top level strategists and directors of agencies and brands and companies talking about strategy, whether advertising or positioning or brand or
Hmm.
business as a whole. And I think as a strategist, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and it's not only about the
incredibly
guests,
valuable.
it's also, yeah, it's also Fergus who moderates the conversation. I really like listening,
Hmm.
enjoy listening to his podcast too. So
Absolutely.
last question is, just one branding book or brand strategy book that you can suggest.
It's just one, only
Just one.
one.
Oh, that's okay. Let's okay. I'll give you an option two, if you want.
uh, so the one I have in mind is Scramble by Marty Newmayer.
Scramble.
Um, yes, Scramble. It is
Hmm.
actually a business thriller. Uh, Marty Newmayer wrote this. He has multiple books on brand strategy, of course.
Yeah, I have
Uh,
this one.
yes, Zag
Zach.
is tremendous. Yes, Zag is tremendous. Um, and Scramble is a business thriller because he figured, well, I already wrote about business in those books, those whiteboard books, as he calls it. Um,
Hmm.
Let me tell a story so it's more interesting for people to
Oh.
read about it, and so people understand maybe the process a little better. And I've
Hmm.
only read it recently. Shame on me for not reading it earlier. I think any strategist and even anyone would enjoy this story, to be honest, and just dive a little
Hmm.
deeper into like, oh, that's how you can do like agile strategy, like a strategic sprint to save a company um, that is on the brink of um, not of failing. Let's say.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. I
Scramble
will.
by Marty Newman.
Yeah, I will check that Scramble. Yeah, I need a book now, so I'll
Mm-hmm.
have a look at that. That's good.
Yes, do it.
So yeah, thanks a lot for joining to the podcast, and I hope we'll have the chance to go through that brand strategy process in a project maybe in the future
I
together,
would
so that we get to
absolutely love that.
learn more about our methodologies.
Yes, I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Steph.